All right, off we go. First off, I want to introduce my good friend Steve Wan. I'm going to let him go through the background of what he's spent his last few years doing, and in a sense, hopefully give you an idea of what this actually means for physics, and maybe at the end you can throw in some thoughts of what you think it does for religion. So I'm going to get out of the way. I figure after you're done with a summary, if you're okay with me throwing out some questions to, or have the kids throw questions out to you.
Yeah, of course.
Sounds good. Perfect.
Go. So my name is Steve, Steve Wan. I have a PhD in particle physics from Northwestern University, and I did most of it at CERN, which is a laboratory in Switzerland. I worked at the Large Hadron Collider. I've also known John since we were about 4 or 5, so we've been friends for a long time. So yeah, I studied different kinds of elementary particle physics. I've been a physicist since about 2004, 2005, when I really decided that this is what I wanted to study. And I looked at a number of different fields, and I decided that it was a really exciting time to be in particle physics because the LHC was scheduled to turn on fairly soon. So I went to Switzerland in 2007 and lived there until end of 2010-ish, and worked at the laboratory. So I actually had the opportunity to be involved both in the construction part of the experiment, where I actually got to build a number of the components that are now on the CMS detector. And then I was there for the startup in 2008, which did not go well. That's when we blew it up. And then I was there for the other startup in 2009, 2010, when we actually managed to successfully get it running and take data. And then I wrote my thesis last year, and yeah, so that's what I do.
That's so exciting. Can you take us through what the Higgs field is and what it means?
So one of the most exciting results that's come out of this research in the last year or so has been this announcement of the Higgs. And the Higgs boson, the Higgs field, is one of the things that we built the LHC specifically to search for. There are 4 fundamental forces of physics. They are the electromagnetic force, the strong and weak nuclear forces, and gravity. And it turns out that 3 of those forces were sewn up into one mathematical set of equations in the late 60s, early 70s that we now call the Standard Model. And very much like the periodic table for chemistry, the Standard Model said, here's how things are going to work, and here's what the particles should look like. And there were gaps in it where we hadn't seen these particles yet. And it predicted what their behavior should be like. And then we went and found these particles. And so with the discovery of the 3rd generation of leptons in the 70s, and then the quarks, there were a number of different particles that were predicted to exist by the Standard Model that were discovered, and each one was something of a verification that this idea was correct, right? And the Higgs field was the last one that hadn't yet been observed. And so we were at a place where there either has to be a Higgs boson, or everything we know about particle physics is wrong. And the amount of experimental evidence that suggested we weren't wrong was so large that we essentially expected to see the Higgs where it is. And so we have got some experimental evidence now that the Higgs is there. It was discovered officially this July. And the exciting thing about it is that it now gives us an idea. So I mentioned there that this theory has 3 of the 4 forces in it. So we know for a fact that it's incomplete. So it seems to be right. Everything we've been able to measure so far has implied that it is correct. But it's certainly not complete, and we can now look at the Higgs to give us an idea of where to look next to extend our understanding of this theory.
That sounds great. Is there, could you offer your opinion as to why you think so many people of different religions were so interested in the discovery of the Higgs?
So, I happen to know Leon Lederman, who's the Nobel Prize-winning physicist who wrote the book, The God Particle, and I think a lot of it comes from that. And he sort of famously has said that it's a title that his editors forced on him. It's not something that he wanted to do. On the other hand, I think that basic science at this level will always touch on questions of religion because specifically the Standard Model and the Higgs give us a very good understanding or very deep insight into the way that the universe formed in its very early moments. And it gives us a lens into seeing immediately after the Big Bang and the inflationary event that sort of began our universe down the path that it has taken to look like it does today. What happened, why things look the way that they do, why things have mass is the question that the Higgs is supposed to answer. But there's a deeper underlying question, right? You can always ask one level down, which is, why did all that stuff happen in the first place? And that's not something that science really is designed to answer. That is not a science question. You can't do experiments, repeatable experiments, or develop hypotheses about why does the universe exist. And so fundamentally, it'll always be a question that touches on the things that religion is designed to answer.
Spoken like a religion professor.
I like that.
Is there anything you guys would like to ask? You also have, Steve, administration here, other teachers, some of my colleagues. And I'm not sure if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask Steve while we've got him here. What time schedule are you on? What time do you need to get?
I've got till 10.
Oh, okay.
So.
Anybody like to kick it off? Go ahead.
What do you believe personally on the theory of like evolution and religion?
Okay, I'm gonna ask it again. The question was, personally, what do you feel on the theory of evolution and religion, based now on your understanding of particle physics?
So about evolution. So I am not. I'm not a biologist, but actually my wife is. And evolution is a scientific theory that, how do I put this? So when the Higgs theory came along in the late 60s, early 70s, the people who were doing these theories, the people that were inventing these theories, that were trying to come up with the way that stuff worked, looked at Peter Higgs' theory and said, that's the one. And they stopped looking. Not because of a lack of intellectual curiosity, but because it made so much sense. And to me, evolution is a similar kind of theory. It doesn't have to be right, and there are certainly a multitude of details that have been wrong. I mean, have been shown to be wrong in the past, right? But at the same time, it makes so much sense that it seems unlikely that it's fundamentally, at its core, incorrect. But again, like to sort of repeat the answer I just gave, it doesn't answer why does life exist or where did it come from in the sense of in like a religious sense. Those are sort of, I guess, my personal thoughts. I think it's hard to answer this question without touching on the political debate that we've had in the last couple of years in this country, and the alternatives to evolution are not scientific theories. That's sort of what it comes down to. That's not to say there never will be one, and one of the great things about science, and one of the things that makes this a hard question to answer, is the fact that scientists are very willing to say that they're wrong. Anytime that a piece of scientific evidence comes along that doesn't fit with the existing theory, scientists immediately will look at that piece of evidence and either throw away the existing theory and come up with a new one, or modify the theory such that it fits. And that is not an admission of guilt or of wrongdoing. It's the way that the scientific process is designed to work. And I think that that's something that a lot of people lose sight of when they point to things like, oh, you know, the evolution of some particular biological pathway was not well understood, and then they find some new fossil, and then they come up with a new theory. That's actually how it's supposed to work. That's not an indication that they're doing it wrong.
Good. Other questions? Nice and loud so the camera can hear.
What do you think the expansion in particle physics impact will be in the future of society?
So that question actually presupposes the idea that particle physics is going to expand, which I actually I don't know that that's true. Particle physics, in a lot of ways, is a field that I think is threatened by shrinkage instead of expansion. If you look at the history of particle physics since the 1940s, particle physicists have ridden this this idea that we're the intellectual heirs of the folks that built the first atom bomb for quite a long time. And it's entirely true. But that's becoming more and more of a historical fact rather than something that's driving the research. You combine that with the fact that particle physics has become so much more complicated, so much more expensive. I mean, Leon Lederman won his Nobel Prize for an experiment that he did with him and 2 grad students overnight at Columbia, at Brookhaven. And then you look at the LHC there, you know, I work with 7,000 scientists and the thing costs $12 billion. It's a totally different scale. And to justify continuing that level of research is actually quite difficult. So I don't see particle physics expanding a lot in the future. Having said that, I don't see it going away either. We've generated so many innovations, technological and other ones. CERN is famously very proud of the fact that they invented the World Wide Web. And that certainly is not what they were planning to do, but it's generated so much, you know, economic impact in the world. When you have basic science research of this size, you can't help but have things come out of it that will affect. But yeah, having said that, particle physics, in a lot of ways, is not a field of research that directly touches anyone's day-to-day life, and in that way, it's sort of hard to justify. So I don't see it growing much, to be honest.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions before we let him go?
Nice one.
Please, nice and loud.
What is your, like, what do you do on a day, like, at a normal day of work? Like, what do you actually do? Like, do you just, like, research? Like, how do you do it?
So, it's interesting that, for me to look back at the way that that's changed. In 2007, I literally, I'd take an elevator down into the shaft. It's about 150 meters down in the ground in Switzerland, and I would build stuff, you know, with my hands. I would assemble components and install them into the detector. That phase is done, so the whole thing is completed, and we sealed it up, and now it's all radioactive, so you can't touch it anymore. So now what I do is a lot of, so essentially I sit in front of a computer. I write a lot of different software to do what we call analysis. When physicists say that, they mean something, I think, a lot different than what a lot of other people mean. But fundamentally, the way that we do these things, for example, the way that we said we discovered the Higgs, is we looked at a number of different collisions, so, you know, hundreds of billions of collisions. Because generating a Higgs is a very rare event, so we looked at many, many different collisions, and we filtered out the ones that only had junk in them. And the process of filtering those out is what I do now, essentially. I decide what kinds of what we call cuts. I say I'm going to eliminate events that don't have X in it. And then I keep...
Oh, man.
It's a birch. Welcome back.
And that's what physicists do. Also, I'm a professor. I don't know if John mentioned that, but I also teach at Northwestern. So I teach not particle physics, but just sort of general APC level physics, basically.
Good. Anything else? Last chance. Everything's good. Well, Steve, honestly, thanks for your time. We will probably end up calling you back sometime here in the near future. If we have any questions that come up, we're going to watch a little Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman and see if that messes with them a little bit more now that we know this. But really appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Great. Well, thanks for having me, and I hope that was helpful. And yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks, Wes.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, thanks.